Hello there, friends. How are you today? Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. Where I am, it's 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on October the 26th. I am Emily Windsor-Craig, and this is History Reset, brought to you each Saturday by People's Internet Radio in Ireland, and now by RadioACTV in Israel, to bring valuable information to the public that corporate media refuse to divulge. This program is a public service, but you are welcome to please donate to People's Internet Radio to keep the people's truth coming at you and without any commercial adverts. Yes, indeed. We have Israel joining us. Now, what on earth is this? How is this happening? I mean, what has Israel got to do with Ireland? Everything, okay? There is a scripture in Genesis that is not only in the Bible, it's in the Urantia book, it's in the OASB, and it's in the Colburn Bible, okay? There's a character, Jacob. And he's in all of these books. And all of these books tell the same story, the same story. And I'm going to read you the story of Jacob. And then we'll go from there, because that's our jumping off place to what Israel has to do with Ireland, okay? And Jacob continued on his way out from Beersheba and kept going to Haran. In time he came across a place and set about spending the night there because the sun had set. So he took one of the stones of the place and set it as his head supporter and lay down upon it, and began to dream, and look, there was a ladder stationed upon the earth, and its top reaching up to the heavens. And look, there were God's angels ascending and descending on it. And look, there was Jehovah stationed above it, and he proceeded to say, I am Jehovah, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land upon which you are lying, to you I am going to give it, and to your seed. And your seed will certainly become like the dust particles of the earth, and you will certainly spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he said, truly Jehovah is in this place, and I myself did not know it. And he grew fearful and added, how fear-inspiring this place is. This is nothing else but the house of God. So Jacob got up early in the morning and took the stone that was there as his head supporter, and he set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. Further, he called the name of that place Bethel. But the fact is, Luz was the city's name formerly. All right, that stone of Jacob's has been in Britain since 583 BC. Jacob's stone. What's it doing in Britain? What has that got to do? How come Ireland, specifically Tara, Cork County, Ireland, why is the prophet Jeremiah buried in Tara, Cork County, Ireland? All right, well, that is the story in the Bible, in the Urantia book, in the OASB, and the Colburn Bible. And that story about the seed of Abraham receiving an inheritance of land to live on in perpetuity is the promise that was given to Jacob, which was taken by Jeremiah and King Zephaniah's two daughters, Teotephi and Sophia, from Jerusalem when it was sacked in 586 BC. In 583, they headed to Egypt with the stone, and then they headed on a ship up north and landed in Ireland in 583 and founded the line of kings there that became the British monarchy. All right, so the British monarchy is actually a branch of the kingdom of David, of which the nation of Israel is a branch. And to make things a little more testy, I don't know if you know anything about the Mormons. Okay. The Mormons have their own book, Book of Mormon. Okay. And the story in the OASP of South America agrees with their Book of Mormon, and the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, which talk about gold mining by Enki's son Ningishita in South America, talks about the gold tablets that are mentioned in the OASP that the Book of Mormon talks about. All right. So these 4 books, these 4 inspired tomes, they're big, they're all big, they're all, 1,000 pages, are the basis for the promise of a land to live in, as Psalm 37 says, for the meek themselves shall inherit the earth, and they shall find their exquisite delight in the abundance of peace. All right, that's the promise of living on our own land as free people, which was fulfilled for a time in Britain from about 500 BC to about 500 AD until the Roman Empire spilled over into Britain and brought the kingdom of David and its manifestation there in Ireland and Scotland to its end. All right, so there was a manifestation of the kingdom of David in Britain 1,000 years ago, and everybody wonders where it went. Okay, it was overtaken, and there was a wonderful woman warrior, Boudica, who fought against the Roman Empire, and she, with her own bare hands, killed 70 Roman soldiers because her 2 daughters had been raped. Okay, so the kingdom of David and its egalitarian, fair, and just laws has been struggling against the empire since Sumeria, Babylon, Assyria, Greece, and Rome, and we don't even know about what Tartaria's stance on the Christian covenant was, but Tartaria isn't here to talk about it either. So they must have been an empire after the imprint of the previous empires. Now, what is the difference between the way the empire operates and the way the kingdom of David operates? Well, today we have an example of empire thinking, okay, in the world, in China, okay, in the EU, and in Islam. They have empire thinking. And what's empire thinking? They have adopted a covenant of redemption by sacrifice, okay? They sacrifice unwanted people, unwanted children. They have adopted vice as simply a matter of business, okay? They tend to allow and codify prostitution, pederasty, slavery, child sex trafficking, child marriage, and nowadays things like body parts marketing and soul trafficking in space commerce. Those are the characteristics of the empire which the kingdom of David fought against when it was just a small band, an itinerant band of mixed race people under Moses, okay? They fought against the worshipers of Baal and Moloch. Today, we are still, who want to experience the kingdom of David, we are still confronting the deep state, whose elite and rich members are part of the satanic pedophile network that worship Baal and Moloch, all right? It's the same fight today as it was back then. The simple common sense, common laws of the Mosaic Covenant, which were carried over into the Magna Carta and the 1689 Bill of Rights and the US Constitution in the UK and the United States, have again been overrun and overturned by maritime admiralty statutes that make prostitution, child sex trafficking, and all of these vices perfectly legal, so that the social milieu in which the people who prefer and want to live in the kingdom of David is not appropriate for the kingdom of David. Now, what happened when the worldwide social milieu was completely inappropriate in the days of Noah, all right, in the days of Noah, when it was giants, oversized people who were dominating the little people, and then the flood came and washed it all away. We know that there was another set of flood apocalypses in the 1600s, the 1700s, and in 1847, a almost worldwide mud flood took down most of civilized society. We still have the buildings that were built before that mud flood. We still have the Greco-Roman architecture, is what they call it. But the Greco-Roman architecture is all over the world. It's very consistent in its architecture, and it's buried in most of the cities in Europe and America to about the 10 to 15 foot level. In other words, the basements of these old buildings got buried, but then the buildings continue to be inhabited. So there are buildings in London with basements buried, in St. Petersburg, Russia, okay, in Baltimore and New York and St. Louis in the United States. The buildings were buried in the recent past, like 180 years ago. And our history doesn't tell us this story of this mud flood, all right? And so the people who are running the worldwide banking network and information network and resource distribution network are very powerful-minded people who tend to belong to the occult pedophile network. And we have a story where they came from. So I've been sorting this out ever since I was a child because of my circumstances. I was dumped in a foster family as an infant, a foster family that didn't match my biology, my way of thinking, or anything. And so it put me in the position to want to know, to want to understand. And because my family had no interest in religion, religion was the opiate of the people, that set me to study. And so I thought today what I would do is explain to my friends and my new friends how it is that a person of British ancestry is so fascinated with Israel and with the kingdom of David, and how things worked out to the point that we now see clearly we're in the same conflict, we're in the same dispute as the Christians were in the first century, as, you know, Buddha had to confront that there's an empire with its vices and its teachings and its just business mercenary attitude that's in the way of our social and civil behavior according to some principles that are held in utter derision by the leaders of today's world. And to figure out, okay, who's going to win this battle? Where did it all start? I had to go over the whole literature. All right. Now, there are three kinds of literature that I had to deal with. And the first was the inspired books to begin with. The Sumerian cuneiform tablets, the Bible, the Oahspe, the Colburn Bible, and the Urantia book. Those are the inspired works that we have. All right. But there were other sources that are not official sources in order to sort out some of the issues in the official sources. When it comes to the occult worship, it's very necessary to understand the difference between paranormal abilities and witch or witchcraft. Okay, paranormal abilities are associated, if you know anything about ETs, with interdimensional abilities, telepathy, clairaudience, clairvoyance, okay, and that kind of stuff. All right, so I had to read Colin Wilson's book on the supernatural. I found Right Use of Will, the early life and history of Jehovah, who was the planetary sovereign for the last precession of the equinoxes, the last 26,000 years. I found that a historian here. Yardavidi, the tribes, traces where the 10 tribes of Israel went after the sacking of Jerusalem in 586. Okay. Then I found the Two Babylons by Bishop Alexander Hislop, and this was written in 1858, that shows you and lays out how the worship of Moloch and Baal has progressed and spread into all the churches and all the institutions, because it's the elites and the intellectuals who are fascinated by Satanism. Okay. The transcriptions of Matilda O'Donnell McElroy explained why we had a Renaissance and an Inquisition, because that was an ET experience. The Voyagers books explained the history that the regular inspired books explain, but it went back much further. It goes back about 25 million years, and it talks about the same plot that these other books talk about. Okay, so then I had to go through the devotional process of figuring out how to reach this Jehovah guy telepathically. So I went through the meditative books to search in my mind how to get out of my own consciousness. So there's the Course in Miracles, the Zuan Falun, which was helpful, the Essene Ethic, the Essene Gospels of Peace. There's the Science of Mind. There's Swedenborg, okay, we got Swedenborg. And the 3 Masonic Christian orders, okay, there's Seventh-day Adventist, Ellen White, Reasoning from the Scriptures, Pastor Russell and Jehovah's Witnesses, and Jesus the Christ. Joseph Smith was also a Mason. So I had to go through their mentations and their ways of thinking to figure out how to reach this Jehovah guy, because he's the only one who actually knew the whole story. All right. So I was able to do something like that, back in 1991, when I was going through some difficult times, and I went through a process that in the Christian faith is called being born again. Never knew what that was. But what it was things were bad. So I got down on my knees and I prayed and I said, look, this life is not working. I need to start over. Will you please let me start over? Okay. And the next morning when I woke up, you know how some people have the radio on all the time and it's yakking at them, or the TV on all the time. The noise going on in their heads is just a din, all right? It was gone. It was gone. I was starting over. And in those days, I was caring for my mother, who was aged and had Alzheimer's and diabetes and all that. I was caring for her. I was a caregiver. I had lots of time. And so for a period of time, 1994 to 1995, I was online like I am now. And I, just on a lark, I started a column to answer people's questions about God. You know, like conversations with God, okay? And so for a whole year, people came to me with their questions. And okay, at some point I have a list of all their names, all of their email addresses that came to me with their questions. And when they gave me a question, you know how you fling the doors open in your mind and you say, I don't know anything about that. And the answers came to me. And I wrote them down, I wrote them down, I wrote them down, wrote them down. And this book, Diversity in the Will of God, is the result of that, in which Jehovah, who at that point was looking forward to retiring in 2012, told me his story. So I began to understand Jehovah as a person like you and me, with wit and knowledge and skills and everything. You know, the church has these formal teachings and formal dogma about God. You know, he's omni this and omni that. And I found out how those statements were both correct, but they were also misleading, and the statements put limits on his ability to function. So I found out about him. All right. So then what do? We have to continuously confront the cheapening and the degradation of the vices that the empire, this new world order, wants to reimpose on humanity again for the 5th or 6th time. We have to resist all of that vice and all of that mercenary capitalism, not just utilizing people taking initiatives to start businesses and helping them out, and you know, the capitalism that gets things done. No, the mercenary. And so I began putting things together to try to help. And diversity in the will of God was the first thing. And the second thing was civil life in galactic history, in which I took the Voyagers 2 version of the beginnings of civilizing this world by the Anunnaki, by Enki and Enlil, and that story, and talked about the rebellion of Satan and the rebellion in Lucifer and what they mean. And they really have very profound meanings, you know. Now, before Satanism embraced witchcraft, it was simply an objection against the overruling of the human soul and spirit by ideology. It actually started out as a libertarian movement. But when witchcraft took it over and dragged it back into the worship of redemption by sacrifice, Satanism was degraded and dragged back into a defiling bunch of, well, now there's a restaurant in Los Angeles, a cannibal restaurant in Los Angeles, if you can imagine that. I don't know how many customers they have. Okay. So the next project I took on was for families with children, so that families with children could explain and show their children that same early history from the time that humans were genetically engineered during the gold mining exploits of the Anunnaki, all right, and how Enki had a line of thought which leads to ascension, where there was a problem with his line of thought because ascension is impossible where you have hybrid mixed race people, because a soul can only ascend to its source, and the source is always the pure race. If you have mixed races, there's no source to go to, all right? And the explanation that Jehovah had given me why he had set up the covenant of redemption, first with the descendants of Adam and and Seth, and Adam and Jacob and Joseph and David, Moses, and so on, all of those, that whole bloodline. You'll notice that bloodline is critical to the whole Mosaic law and common law. It has been, and it was very common for family Bibles to keep their own genealogy. That is a practice that is carried on today by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who are the Christians who call themselves Hebrews. I'm not in a position to judge whether the Mormons are actually Hebrews or not. That's between them and God, but they do keep track of bloodline. And this is why the practice of abortion has been so detrimental to the Jewish and Christian lines of thought, because the numbers of people in families who support an austere and ascetic and demanding ethic has decreased relative to the number of people who have been born to barbaric and naive and ignorant peoples. This has been a big problem. All right.
Emily?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If the people in Israel now are the Ashkenazis or the Khazarians, are there Jewish people?
Yes, there are real Jewish people there. About 40% of the people there are observant Jews. Among those, there are some who also observe the Talmud, which, like the Vatican approach of the Jesuit order, allow the imperial practices and vices to occur. All right. So among the Jews, the 40% of Jews, there are some who hold to the Babylonian doctrines of child sex trafficking and usury and pederasty and stuff like that. So we'll say that the real Jews are about 30%. I have a graph I got out of the Google list of pictures that shows the demographics of Israel. The other 60% are secular and Islamic, and a very few Christian. So it's basically 60-40 secular and occult and Christian versus 40% observant Jews. Now, racially, 20% of Israel is Semite, 80% Ashkenazi, all right? And Palestinians are all Semite. So the argument that argument that calls the hatred of Jews as anti-Semitism is inaccurately portrayed. It's not, are the 40% observant Jews the ones who are Semites? I don't know. Is there a match there? What most people who object to Israel object to is the Zionist practices of usury, child sex trafficking, and the usual practices of the empire coming out of Babylon. Have I made any sense to you? Does that?
A little bit.
Am I clear? You get it?
Sure.
Okay. So we want to explain to our kids how we got here into this world of so much conflict. And I've tried to do it in the book, Come Let Us Make Man in Our Image and After Our Likeness, because what I've done is show the two lines of thought from Enki and Enlil, the Anunnaki, and how they evolved and derived and became and developed into different ideologies that come down to us today. All right. So we have the ancient Lyran ideology that became Atlantean, and that gradually, with the submergence of the North Pole, came down into Siberia and into Russia. New Earth channel on YouTube articulates the survivors of the Atlantean culture. She goes into wonderful detail and shows you all the stone technologies that were associated with the Atlanteans. All right. Then we have Jacob, our good old friend Jacob, and his redemptive covenants, Judaism through Moses, and then the Beatitudes of Mary and Joseph through Jesus Christ, the Son of Jehovah, okay? And Christ took the laws and applied rules of thinking to the laws so that the laws would be applied fairly, all right? That was the change that occurred from Judaism, which was all about behavior, and Jesus talked all about intentions, all right, and how people treat each other. Following Jesus is a really tough order when you're also trying to get good results in your life, because people tend to try to take advantage of people who are honest, and Jesus taught absolute honesty. Whereas in the law, as long as you did the correct behavior, your intentions were not questioned too much. All right. So that's why I did this book. Then I did 3 books on the problems that have accrued with the reestablishment of the imperial mentality. I reprinted Behold a Pale Horse by the late Milton William Cooper. I reprinted the papers of Phil Schneider and the early UFO records in Behold the Dulce record of ET trafficking, because ET trafficking causes 40-odd thousand disappearances out of the United States every year, and 11,000 disappearances out of Japan every year. I don't know the statistics for other nations, but the prospect of being abducted is not a benign prospect, and it does happen. And so these are the people that talked about the experiences of the abducted and the experiences of the government to hide the abductions. And the third book that I did, Behold, World Trade Center 9/11, I explain it in the language of Dr. Pastori, who was actually an Israeli who published his analysis of the 9/11 attack back in 2002. It's been up on my website, abeiivemiracles.com, since 2002, and I finally published it as a small book this last year. All right. So I've been busy publishing books because I'm trying to collect the thoughts. How do we get Ireland and Israel on the same page, okay, in our methods in order to resist the top-down New World Order, which practices the same cynical mafia behaviors as all the other empires did, okay? Child sex trafficking, child sacrifice, and cannibalism, and the abuse of truth tellers, and the use of gaming to control and manage people as if we are cattle, and we're not cattle. So then I did three more books on ways that we can obviate or skirt or get around the imperial thinking of the New World Order. Let your no mean no, which means we have to take control of our language in order to control our relationships in a fair and just way. Take life's water free. This book talks about the experience of spiritual people who have attempted communities of their own and how they've fared. And Turn Back Tyranny, some information I found and kind of collected on how to finance your own community and how to regard and deal with people who are cynical. So that has been my contribution to the problem of making sense out of the cacophony, the New World Order's. You know, it's like trying to take a drink out of a fire hose when you're viewing the mainstream media. Their agenda to control us all is so very, very clear. But having a soul, an eternal spirit inside this human body, we have the right to control ourselves, and we have the God-given right to determine our own future without being controlled by technology. So there's the people who seek redemption by sacrifice and controlling everything. There are the people who seek redemption by controlling their own communities and controlling themselves. There are people who seek redemption by the ascension process of following their souls and not paying too much attention to what politics and the empire is doing. But now there is a fourth method, and the fourth method is technical. It's not necessarily technology. It's not necessarily machine robots running the world. No, it's technical methods, it's skills, it's the knowledge of how things work to make things work better. And that is where we can take the example of the creation, which is, this computer is coded. It's Microsoft Windows, and if nobody wrote the code, the computer would never work. And each cell in the body is coded with a DNA code, and if nobody coded the code, the body wouldn't work. And so the evolutionists who want us to believe that DNA coded itself can go whistle, because our biology was coded by an intelligent being, all right? And one of the things I found out in, yes, Domain Against Order, Prison Planet Earth, was that there's a whole race of biological coders, and they're called the domain. And some have been here since about the 13th century, and they've been busy coding technology. And since they just came to have a good time and play, some of them are coding the games that are used against us. So what we as people can do is collect our skillful methods, collect our methods that actually work to sanctify our communities, prepare our bodies to live long and prosper, as good old Spock used to say, all right? And to make provision for the apocalypse that's always around the corner. You know, I don't know whether to be frustrated by these evangelicals or just to laugh at them, because they're always calling for the end of the world and for the next disaster. That's their message all the time. The problem is these disasters occur regularly, all right? Look what just happened to the Bahamas, okay? Terrible disaster to the Bahamas, the tsunami that went through there, the storm surge, the hurricane, all right? Earthquakes shake China up regularly, shake up Peru and Chile regularly. There are horrific disasters that occur all the time. I live here in California, and the electric company announced yesterday that our power was going to be turned off in case there was too high wind that the power would cause a fire. Well, guess what? Over at Cobb Mountain, and this is the third time that a fire has exploded right near Cobb Mountain. And Cobb Mountain has an underground ET base there, and Cobb Mountain has carved faces in the sides of it that have been there for eons and eons. And so somebody's trying to put Cobb Mountain on fire. I lived on Cobb Mountain from 2012 to 2014, all right? And I had just moved into a new rental when that little cabin, that little house I was renting on Cobb Mountain was obliterated in the first fire. And then the second fire came within a quarter of a mile of the second house, okay? And when I was moving here, the Paradise Fire is just 20 miles up the road. Okay, there are disasters all the time, okay? And so one of the things that the kingdom of David needs to do as a way of thinking and a methodology of solving problems needs to do is to have a stock of resources and sharing networks to help the people who take its ethics seriously into disaster relief of some sort. The reason I say this is because of my experience with the fires here in California. A couple of years ago, now the fires began in 2015. The first Cobb fire was in 2015. The second Cobb fire was in 2016. The Paradise Fire was in 2018, all right? And there was a newspaper article last year that said 100,000 people have been displaced by these fires. And I looked around and I said, where'd they go? We're 20 miles from the Paradise Fire. 35,000 homes were obliterated in the Paradise Fire. I live in an area where there are rentals all over this area. Did any of the Paradise Fire casualties come here? No. Where'd they go? We don't know. They never showed up here. All right. And that's when it began to concern me about the numbers of people who are missing, okay, 411 missing by David Paulides, the number of missing in Japan. That's when it began to concern me that I didn't know where the missing people were going, and that we as holders of an ethic in which honesty and truth-telling, let your know mean no. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. Where we have relationships where we can actually trust each other's word, okay? That ethic is diminishing and diminishing and diminishing in the face of the encroachment of the New World Order and its cynical, imperial, mafia manners, okay? And so we who want to be honest with each other and trust each other have to have a way to garner and gather our resources and our associations so we can help each other through these disasters, because disasters happen all the time. It's silly to keep preaching the end of the world when the end of the world comes for somebody almost every day. There's the end of the world in Bahamas, there's the end of the world in China, there's the end of the world in Chile with an earthquake or a flood or a tsunami. Look at what Japan has had to deal with the Fukushima tsunami. And so that's the place where I'm going in writing my books, to help gather the ideas and the methods we're going to need to be an eternal people on the land, an eternal people on the land, because that's what Jehovah promised to Jacob. And we're still in diaspora. We still have our copy of the law, and the law is simply, if you do a good deed, you get a good outcome. And if you refrain from doing something bad, you get a good outcome. And if you do something bad, you have to be corrected and you have to repair the damage and then get put back on the path to doing good. This is the whole basis for the notion of social trust. So that's my work. That's what I do. And I think my work is salient to Israel, who are holding on to their commandments, their law from Jehovah, who they call Hashem. Is that it? Hashem? Yeah. They're afraid to use his name. I'm not afraid to use his name anymore. I'm afraid to use my friend's name because I consider God, Jehovah, to be a friend of anyone who wants to be a friend to him. He's very responsive. He's been very, very responsive to me and attentive to my prayers, and he's kept me going through this process. Now, the people who only have the Bible are pretty silly, because I don't know of any person in the world who could call themselves educated if they only have one book. I've pointed out 4 large tomes: the Oaspi, the Urantia book, the Bible itself, and the Colburn Bible. Okay, these are the basic covenantal books surrounding the story of Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and so forth. All right. Why are we stuck with one and not able to move out into the other books? why have we not paid close attention to the practice of prayer and meditation and thought self-control so we maintain our position in Pilgrim's progress, excuse me. You see, the whole point of this process and progress is that we are training and educating a soul to live in the larger universe where people are really, really, really different. Okay. You know, I have a hobby. I take moon pictures that have been snapped by either NASA or backyard photographers. And I bring up the focus so you can see the people walking around. All right. And some of the people walking around on the moon do not look exactly like us. They have, you know, a head, and arms and legs, and they walk around, but they have funny skin colors. Some of them are a pretty iridescent blue, and others look like light bulbs. They have the same DNA, but different elements that they're made out of, so they look different, all right? By studying the moon, I have seen the diversity and the love of God that our civilization has done everything they can do to eradicate by not disclosing the fact that, one, because the North Star is directly over us, we are in the center of the universe, okay? And two, the reason ETs come here is they know that the Big Bang is about to collapse, and we're probably in only one of the few safe areas in the whole universe for the collapse of the ecliptic, right? Three, the ETs that come here need resources. We need to be able to do business with them on a level playing field of trust and honesty, and not just create a mafia to send out to the galaxy. All right. There's a universe of relationships that we need to pay attention to. And why do I say this now? Because I just found out, did you know that Welsh and Gaelic are both related to Hebrew, and that the Anunnaki speak Hebrew, so that the covenant that we have are the very basis of a civilized society that's capable of teaching trust, but it's being overturned and twisted by the desire of a few very brilliant, very rich people to dominate over everybody. In order for them not to be able to dominate over everybody, we have to become smarter. We have to become more skilled. We have to have more children. Otherwise, they outnumber us. We need to get our children's education under our control, because our children are being propagandized into accepting the cynical imperial ethic which says there are 5 genders and everybody has a right to any kind of sexuality that they want to practice, and it has no public health consequences. That's not what it says in holy law. That's not how the commandments of God ordained that human society could become worthy of mutual trust. Okay, I think I've pretty well covered it, Steve. Do we have any questions?
I don't believe.
We don't have any questions today. At Facebook, I have 23 people.
Oh, there is a question.
Okay. Shoot.
Hang on a second. I want to put it on a different script here. Just a few seconds. Okay. All our governments have been exponentially corrupted. Is there a realization in Israel that globalists and corporates have divided the good working class people of Israel and Palestine. They are using divide and conquer tactics on all good people to the detriment of both Israel and Palestine.
And that question is an excellent question, and I'm going to have to ask that my producer in Israel get the answer for me, because you see, I've never been to Israel, and the request that I begin to tell this story to the people of Israel is just an inestimable honor to me, because I've never been there. But the people of Israel do not know that they are related to the people of Ireland and Scotland and England and Scandinavia. The 10 tribes that went into diaspora were all Hebrew Israelis, all right? And so Israel is now down in the Mideast, but there's a branch of the Hebrews in Ethiopia and another one in Salt Lake City. Okay, Zion is a construct of a place where people learn how to trust each other and tell each other the truth and get along with diversity. All right, that's not what the empire is doing. The empire plays the divide and conquer game, red against blue, conservative against liberal, black against white, you know, back and forth. That's what the media are doing, is dividing us from each other. Whereas when we read the holy books, division is not part of our teachings. In these 4 books, there is no teaching anything like takia, which is deceit, nor jizya, which is a protection racket, nor jihad, which is domination over other people, let alone wife beating, child marriage, female genital mutilation, beheading unbelievers. I mean, the Quran, all right, claims to be a holy book from God, but the other 4 holy books from God don't have any of those practices in them. And we who are beset by people who want to practice vice and practice violence in our midst have to find a way to garner our collective strength, the way that Islam has garnered its collective strength, okay? Islam has been a great mover in taking over and dominating populations. Well, we're the populations they intend to dominate, and we cannot allow our civil ethic to be degraded by suspicion, intolerance, and an unwillingness to assimilate culturally. We have to do something else. And we have to do it living up to our own principles. We're not going to stoop to conquer. So that's the struggle that we're facing. And that's why talking to both Ireland and Israel is appropriate, because we're all in the same struggle against the cynical methods of the empire, the New World Order, and the where trade is more important than people. So there we go. So that's it for this week. I hope, let's see, I will put some links for a few of these. I hope they're helpful books. I put a lot of work into them, and they just take this whole problem one step at a time. And we're going to get there from here, because God is with the people who want to be with God. And he stands with his creative, benign methods. He's not a warmonger. He's not a liar. He's not a cheater. And let us not be that either. So Steve, hey, I'm ready to go. We'll see you later. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Okay, you're off.